So you want a job at Google? Well, I can help you with that. To get a job at Google, there are 3 areas where you need to excel. You need to know how to land the interview, you need to know how to do the technical part of the interview, and then you need to know how to do the behavioral part of the interview. In this video, I'm going to be helping out engineers with industry experience on how to get a job at Google. How do you differentiate yourself as somebody who's been working in the industry for many years from somebody else who's been working in the industry for many years? Common advice you hear is to get somebody who worked at Google to recommend you. And while that can help a lot, especially if they're a good employee, that is not your only option. Something you might not know is that there are actually job fairs that Google goes to that people in the industry can still attend. A quick Google search can actually tell you all the conferences that are happening this year, and you can check which ones Google might be attending. These conferences are going to be full of people who want to talk to Google. The Google line might even be one of the longest lines. Something that's good about applying from the industry is that you're probably applying for a specific role. You already have some experience, and you, at this point, if you want to get into Google, should stay within the realm of your expertise. If you want to do a specialization shift, you can do that, but I do not recommend doing that for your first role within Google. Once you've been at a role within Google for 1 year, you can switch teams, and it will be much easier to do that than to just go into that team right from the get-go. Getting Google's attention in a job fair is incredibly difficult. If you specialize your resume for the role you're applying for at Google and you have 3 different resumes for 3 different roles, you'll have a much higher chance of getting in than just giving one general resume that just kind of goes into all the roles. It's incredibly important that when you're applying for these roles, you want to make sure your resume is filled with experience related to the role you're applying for. And then you want to make sure that this experience has actual metrics. You're going to expect to have products with real users. Of course, because you're in the industry, you are limited in the amount of information you can give. You might have signed an NDA with your company where you can't actually share all that information. Make sure you put in metrics that don't break any NDAs with you and your company. And if you make them percentages, you're pretty much giving no information about the actual number of users, but giving all the information that a recruiter might need to know about the impact you had on your project. Now, that's not to say that you should completely shy away from the number of users that your application works. It looks a lot better when you're working in an application that's used by millions of users than one that's used by a few hundred users. Google is a company that works at scale. So if you have experience working at scale, that will look much better than somebody who has only really worked on very small applications. This very heavily depends on the role you're applying for. Applying for a UI role, it might not matter as much as if you're applying for a backend role or some sort of server management role. Try to see if there's anyone that you've worked with in the past who is currently working at Google. That will be your best recommendation. Just finding a random recommendation generally does not give you as much of a boost as someone that you've actually worked with before. If you submit your resume without any recommendation or any networking, you really have to be incredibly lucky to get past to the interview phase. However, let's assume you did. If you're enjoying this video, please subscribe. I know I'm giving good information here, and I would really love for you to support this channel. So when we're doing this behavioral interview, you want to focus on 2 things. 1, being as charismatic as you've ever been in your life. I know, as a nerd, speaking for myself, it is actually hard to be a little charismatic sometimes. It really does take a little bit of practice. You should practice these interview questions on your own and in front of other people. You should not be embarrassed. If you're still embarrassed to do mock interviews with your friends, that means you haven't done enough mock interviews. You should be able to roll these answers off the tongue with no embarrassment, just pure confidence. And for some people, that might be a little harder than others. That doesn't mean you should give up. You can do it. You don't have to be born charismatic. You don't have to be born confident. All you need to do is practice speaking. The second thing you should focus on is making sure that you're a team player. When Google does these behavioral interviews, they make sure to have your resume on hand. They read off your resume and they want to know more about the projects you put on there. Those projects are the reason that they had interest in you. And really what it boils down to is that they're just trying to make sure that what you're writing on your resume is something you actually did. They want to hear believable stories about your interactions with your teammates when creating these projects. Now, and they want to see not only that you can work well with other people, but that you might have some opportunity for growth, for leadership. You want to think about a few stories, and you want to have these stories prepared before you get into the interview. You want to think about how you manage the work, how you split the work up, whether there was any issues with people not getting their work done, or any arguments that your teammates got into, and how you resolve those. Before any interview, but especially a behavioral interview, you want to actually write down some story. You don't want to just go in and say, I have these stories in my head, I'm ready. You should write down a full story and then be able to adapt that story to any questions they ask. Ideally, you have at least 3 stories that you can adapt to any question. If you've looked at the STAR method, that's a great method for kind of organizing your thoughts, organizing your stories, and answering these behavioral questions. I really recommend looking into it, and there are amazing resources online for this already. So I'm not going to go too deep into it in this video. If you've heard the term Googliness, that is something that we actually measure at Google. And while in the beginning, it was kind of just a vibe check, at this point, we've standardized it a little bit so that it's actual metrics that we're looking into and grading. You can look up what being googly is and what those metrics are. I won't talk about each one in this video because that could be a whole video all on its own. But keep in mind that those are the metrics we're looking for most in a behavioral interview. But we do look for those in technical interviews as well. The technical portion of the interviews that you might see when applying for a specific role when coming from the industry is going to be way more specific to your role. Now, of course, Google does many rounds of interviews and some of those rounds will actually be generic questions. We want to know that your problem-solving abilities are still good outside of your expertise. For the generic questions, you might have done some of these before. Google understands that as somebody who's worked in the industry, you haven't practiced these questions in years. Usually when we're testing these problem-solving abilities for somebody who's worked in the industry for a while, we're not expecting you to be a pro at something like dynamic programming. You can be expected to sometimes remember some of these algorithms, and you should at least brush up on them before these interviews. But really the main part of your interview process is going to be very role-specific knowledge. You might be asked to do a simple code change that the engineer had to do a week ago, or something that really just shows off that you know how to do what you're saying that you know how to do. For this part of the interview, I'd expect that you probably will have a good grasp of it. It might be hard for you to find somebody who can do mock interviews for you. Well, lucky for you, there are actually resources for you to find somebody. The main thing you could look for is Discords that offer mock interviews. There are plenty of Discord servers that can help, and this might be crazy for you to hear, but there's people that do this stuff just for fun. I used to love doing this when I was in college. I would love giving mock interviews. Well, people love doing this stuff just for fun on Discord, and they'll give you good feedback. You shouldn't only have one interviewer, because the thing is that sometimes their opinions might not fit for all cases. It's good to have a variety of opinions and kind of go with whatever your gut tells you is the best approach. Make sure to be open and receptive to feedback. If for some reason you feel uncomfortable going onto a Discord to do this kind of stuff, you can ask non-technical friends or family to help you with these interviews. They're not going to be able to correct you on if you did things wrong, but you can at least practice talking about them. And they might be bored out of their mind, so maybe treat them to a cup of coffee or something after you do it. If the interviewer notices that you're spending a lot of time going in the wrong direction, they're gonna try to give you subtle hints to try to get you away from there. If you're in the middle of talking and the interviewer says something, I know it's very scary to lose your train of thought and listen to what they're saying, but that's actually a very important part to the interview. There's a good chance that they're really trying to steer you to get the correct answer. The last thing you really need to know when doing these technical interviews is that one of the things the interviewer is looking for is your ability to explain your solution. I think that's best done through the process. You need to explain your thought process as you're thinking. Now, this is an acquired skill. It is not easy. Talking and coding is very difficult, but it's a skill that will really help you stand out. This takes time and practice. Sometimes it's even good to record yourself. You might think that you sound a certain type of way, but when you look at your own recording, you're gonna think, oh wow, that is not at all the way I thought it was gonna be. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. I have a goal of hitting 1 million subscribers in 1 year, and I need your help to do it.